We are building the welcome message project from the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. Previously, we saw how we could create very flexible functions, for example, short form with star words. Basically, this is like a non-keyword argument. The moment I have the star words, it means that I can give any number of arguments to my function and it works perfectly fine. We also noticed that inside the function, words is in fact a tuple. And we said that tuples are quite similar to lists, but there are some differences. The fact that tuples are similar, in fact, is visible from this for loop. This for loop could very well work on lists. Basically, we are saying, okay, for word in words, which means that we are taking word to be every item of this tuple. Let's spend some time trying to understand this tuples a little bit more closely and also see how they're different from lists. Now, let's start with some basics. Basically, lists and tuples are kind of similar in the sense that they create, they sort of store objects, store, let's say, multiple variables together. I create a tuple almost like I create a list. I can do this, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 comma separated values. But the very important point is that I must put these tuples inside the round bracket. Now, remember, list was square brackets. Tuple is going to be a round bracket. Let me also create a list over here just for the illustration. So notice 1, 2, 3, 4. The contents of A and B are exactly the same in this case, but notice A is a tuple and B on the other hand is a list. That's because A was created with these rounded brackets. B has been created with square brackets. Now, it turns out that in fact, I can slice tuples. I can index tuples exactly same as. So for example, let's say, if I look at A square bracket 0, that is 1 and that's correct because item 0 of A is indeed 1. Just like I can look at B0 is 1. In fact, I can, like I said, I can slice this as well. So I can go and say A, let's say start, stop, say steps. So let's say I say start at, for example, 2, go all the way to the end in steps of 1. If I were to do this, well, I get only 3 and 4. Now, that's exactly again same as list because the same logic holds, start, stop, step. So this part looks exactly the same. Just like lists, tuples can also hold data from different data types. For example, if let's say I can create another tuple here, let's say 1, 2, I can have, let's say, test as a string. I can then put, let's say, a list in here. So, this is a tuple which has got different types of data. That's true for list as well. All the different items can have different data types. You've seen this before. I can, for example, look at C0. That is 1. C2, for example, is test. That's a string. And C3 is a list. So that's perfectly allowed. It's allowed for list as well. And let's say tuples as well, right? So these parts are all exactly the same. We have also seen the tuples, over here, for example, tuples can run for loops just like, lists. So these are all the similarities. But now the question is, what are the differences? In fact, there is one and extremely important difference, which is that tuples once created cannot be modified. In fact, this is known as tuples being immutable. And you may not have realized this, but in fact, strings are also immutable. Let's see what this means in practice. Remember here, I have A, which is a tuple. I have B, which is a list. I have C, which is again a tuple. I know that for a list, I can go and change any items. I say, for example, B0 is say 12. That's not a problem. Now list has become 12, 2, 3, 4. That's because B0 was made 12. But if I were to try the same exact operation on my tuple, that will cause a problem. Let's say I say it's 12. Now it's not about 12. It's, let's say, any other value. Let's say I make it 15. This will not be allowed because tuple object does not support item assignment. What this means is that, well, look, tuple, once it has been created, it cannot be changed. Likewise, let's say I try something for C. So C2 I know is test. Let's say I try to do something like C2 is 0. This will not be allowed because tuple really cannot be changed. And that's what is called immutability. In fact, the same, as I said, applies to strings. So let's say I have a string called D, which is, let's say, called test. Now, if I want to try and say D0, of course, that is T. But if I try to do, say, D0 should become B to become best, well, that's not possible. So I have to create a new string, which is best, right? So strings and tuples are immutable. Once they have been created, they cannot be changed. Extending this a little bit, what this also means is that I could do, for example, b.pop0. which will take out the first item from the list B. If I were to now look at B, it's now 2, 3, 4 because first item has been removed. But I can't do this to, for example, a tuple, because remember, tuple once created cannot be changed. Its length also cannot be changed. So I cannot go and pop this out. My A is still 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is probably the most important difference, which kind of drives everything else. The fact that tuples once created cannot be changed. These are hence immutable. Now you might wonder, why would I ever want this? What kind of context would require this? Remember, when we looked at dictionaries, we said that, look, dictionary keys can be strings, dictionary keys can be tuples, but dictionary keys cannot be lists. And the reason, it just comes down to just exact this thing, because lists are mutable. They can change as the program runs. Tuples, on the other hand, will not change, will stay as it is. Once created, tuples stay as it is. That's why tuples can be keys, for example, in dictionaries. In general, when you are dealing with the program, where you want some kind of data to stay, let's say constant, throughout the program, tuple, and it's, let's say, a lot of data together, rather than, let's say, being an integer or number. So let's say lots of things together, which you do not want to change. It could be, for example, sometimes in a game, let's say you're storing X and Y coordinates of some fixed points. That could be a tuple. In this case, let's say, or it could be, let's say, some kind of sequence of names which doesn't change through the game. That could also be a tuple, right? So depending on the context, you may want to use tuples. Quite similar to lists in usage, as we have just seen, but difference being this mutability. Before I wrap this up, let's just look at it once more. Similarities will both store collections of data. Both can store any kind of data. We just saw this. Both are ordered, which means there's a kind of order maintained, like what comes first, what comes later. You can iterate over both of them. You can run a for loop on both of them. As we saw, index items can be accessed through index operators. Using square brackets, exactly the same, and both can be sliced. We saw all of this. Differences are, and this is probably the biggest difference, tuples are immutable, lists are mutable. Tuples, hence, as a consequence, cannot be modified or deleted. Tuples length is also changed, so I cannot go and append something to tuple. I just saw that I can't remove anything from the tuple. As a consequence, also tuples store lesser memory and are fastest to access than lists, because it is kind of like read-only. Once created, they cannot be changed. Hence, they're kind of like read-only, right? And we saw that tuple syntax uses round brackets or parentheses. Lists uses square brackets. So important, very nice to sort of understand these differences and use them judiciously. I hope this was fun for you. And if you think this way of learning by building activities is something that you enjoy, look at our website, www.ybyte.in, because that is how we learn Python programming. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.